Everybody ready? Sure. Okay, folks, we're going to call our October 12th Board of Trustees meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Krystal, we'll take a roll call when you're ready.
Trustee Gator.
Here.
Trustee Jerome.
Here.
Trustee Kenny. Present. Trustee McDonald.
Here.
Trustee Whitehouse.
Here.
Mayor Hammond.
Here. How about our Mayor Pro Tem?
He is not logged on yet.
Okay. You know, if he logs on, we'll know. Any amendments to the agenda we need to be aware of? Tonight? Okay. Conflicts of interest? Okay. This time we're at the public forum, community participation. Individuals wishing to speak on a non-agenda item are going to be asked to come up to the podium and sign and state your name and address, and you'll be given 3 minutes to speak on non-agenda items. So if anyone wants to come up, now's a good time.
Hi, Melanie Murphy, 3584 Polk Circle East.
Can you pull the microphone up, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to scream. How is that?
There you go.
Melanie Murphy, 3584 Polk Circle East. I am Melanie Murphy, Outreach Coordinator for Responsible Wellington, a local community group working to pass 2B and 300 this year. If passed, 2B and 300 will provide significant benefits to our wonderful community, all while ensuring strict regulations. Passage of 2B will provide roughly $400,000 more revenue to our town, while the passage of 300 will add an additional $400,000 more for a total of $800,000 added revenue. Our town's projected 2021 total sales tax was roughly $1.9 million. So this $800,000 will represent a 42% increase. That is huge. We can do a lot in our community with that money, and it's one of the reasons I'm supporting and working so hard to pass 2B and 300. Sorry, main reason I am here is for my mother. In 2017, when she was diagnosed with cancer and given 10 months to live, I was devastated, as were my children. My mom decided to fight cancer any way possible. She wanted to stick around, stay alive for her grandkids to ensure they remembered her when they got older. Traditional methods didn't work and she turned to cannabis. We saw immediate results. These results kept my mom alive for an additional 4 years. 4 more years with her grandkids building memories that they will have forever. During this time, I had to continually drive into Fort Collins to get the medicine that was helping my mom. That is crazy. Cannabis is a benefit that will help people like my mom. We need to offer it right here in our community for those that want and need it. So with all of that, I am asking anyone listening and watching tonight to please vote yes on 2B and 300. It's the responsible thing for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy.
Yes, have a good evening.
Thank you too. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public comment at this time and we'll go right into some presentations. We'll be here for a little bit. First one's got 60% cost estimate for a wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Meyer.
there it goes. You just have to get up.
Sorry about that, everybody. Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees, Dave Meyer, Staff Engineer. Nice to see everybody again. So tonight we're going to talk about the 60% cost estimate that came in for the wastewater treatment plant. I prepared a board package for you that kind of explains the background on it. We got a couple of slides we're going to go through right here. First slide. A moment. So the 60% design package was received on time from Jacobs on August. Sorry, maybe technical difficulties here, new laptop. August 27th, 2021. Right after that, Mold started preparing its 60% cost estimate, and 3 of those cost estimates came in. One of them was on the 16th, one of them on the 22nd, and one on the 28th. And VE options, value engineering options, were identified with each one of those cost estimates. Final 60% cost estimate was received on September 28th, and that accounted for all the VE efforts that we went through prior to that. The 60% cost came in at $39,757,290. I put a picture for everybody of what the cost estimate breakdown is on your slide presentation. Quick comparison, 30% cost versus the 60% cost. The 30% cost came in May at $39,049,319. The 6% cost, $39,757,290, represents a difference of about $700,000 increase. So what are the causes of that increase? A few things. First and foremost is increase in electrical costs. And John Tucker from Molds is joining me here. We'll be speaking in a minute about costs in the industry right now. More stringent geotechnical requirements for over excavation that were issued by our geotechnical engineer. So more digging, more cost. And also, this is the big one, enlargement of the aeration basin, one of the bigger structures in this design. We got PEL requirements from the, that's preliminary effluent limit requirements from CDPHE. That's specified more stringent ammonia and TIN control. That's total inorganic nitrogen. And the instrumentation and controls that we needed to facilitate that bigger basin. So increase in size in that aeration basin. Right now, I'm going to turn the podium over to John Tucker. He's the project manager from Molds. He'll talk a little bit about the costs in the industry right now. After that, Kyle Snyder, project manager from Jacobs, is going to talk to you all about what's coming up for this project. So, John.
Sure. Hi, I'm John Tucker, the project manager for Molds Construction. I guess the differences in 30 to 60. I guess I got good news and bad news. The good news is 3 months ago when we had 30, there was no subs and suppliers that would hold their price for more than 5 days. All the commodities were going up and everything. Now things are still high, but they are leveling off. The good thing is that people are holding their prices for 30 and 60 days now, when it was 5 and didn't know how far it would go up. So I guess what it signals to me is that it is kind of leveling off, and I'm hoping by December when we go to 90%. I've heard that there's some talk that steel prices might go down a little bit, which is a big one. Pipe prices, I believe, are going to stay up, but with hurricane season over, that really affects the PVC market and some of the plastic pipes. So I think it's leveled off. I'm really hoping for at least no more upswings come December, but things are still pretty high. Fuel costs are high. All the commodity prices that kind of go in this are still pretty high, but I believe they are leveling off. So that's really good news. And we'll go out to bid to everything in December, January, when we get to the 90% level.
Okay, thanks, John. Kyle Snyder, Jacobs project manager, is going to talk to us about the project schedule moving forward.
All right, good evening, everyone. Just wanted to touch on a few schedule items. We've got a lot of parallel processes in addition to engineers working on drawings and specifications. We've got a lot of approvals, local and state. So as Dave mentioned, the preliminary effluent limits, that's a part of the permitting process with CDPHE. That's been complete and that was delivered on time by CDPHE. The draft utility plan, that has been submitted to North Front Range Water Quality Planning. So that's one of the local approvals. That's the local water quality agency for Larimer and Weld County. And so they review first and then it goes to the state for their engineering review. So that's been submitted as well. We have a project needs assessment. That's part of the loan process. So it's another engineering document that helps justify the project to the folks that are lending the money. And so that is just one step away from being submitted. Additionally, the next step in the CDPHE review process on the engineering side is the site application. That too is one step away from being submitted, and CDPHE engineering will review that then. We also have an environmental assessment as part of the loan process. It too is just waiting for one final step and then it can be submitted to the loan group, grants and loans at CDPHE. And what we're starting to work on now while we're waiting for these other documents is the next step in the design review process, which is the process design reports, more detailed engineering review, looks step by step at the requirements of the state for wastewater treatment plant design. And that will be submitted in early December. In terms of the design process, our 60% package, as Dave mentioned, was submitted at the end of August. Our engineers and architects are now working on the 90% package. It will be delivered on December the 3rd and handed over to John and Moltz for their next round of cost estimating. Will be the final round. And that will be then produced in early January for the town and the engineer to review. And following that, after the town staff is reviewed, then it will be presented to the board for their approval as well. And we're estimating in February. Following that, we'll do the final touch-ups on the drawings. That will be the 100% design package in early March. And then that will be submitted to CDPHE as well. And then estimating construction can start approximately May when the loan funds would get dispersed. And finally, a little more on the loan process. There will be a public meeting, which is a requirement of the loan process. So haven't decided on how that will be either tied into a board meeting or a separate standalone meeting. The Jacobs will work with town staff to lead that. The actual loan application is due January 14th. And then there will be a board meeting from the Water and Power Authority in March to approve the loan. And then after the bond sale in approximately May, then the funds can be dispersed.
Thank you, Kyle. The other thing I added to the board package was the recent 6% site plan for your viewing enjoyment. That's the end of the presentation. We're here to answer any questions you might have.
Board members, any questions for our team?
Yep. What else, Rick?
I have more of a comment that with the commodity prices being what they are, the fact that from 30 to 60, that the price increase was not more dramatic. That's not something we saw in some of the water treatment plant procedures or design. So that's this is a complicated thing, I know, and I'm impressed. Yeah, because the markets are wacky.
Yeah, when I first saw the estimate, I was fairly pleased that it wasn't higher than that. Put it that way.
So I had a couple of questions. So the first is, I believe it was on page 10 of our packet, you provided the phase 3 expansion improvements 30 to 60% cost comparison, which if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like the difference from the 30% to 60% on that page was actually a reduction of 21,000, but then yet you're saying that the overall increase was by 700,000. So I'm wondering where that difference is because it's not showing in this page here.
What you're looking at, Trustee Gator, is something that our contractor put together that gave a comparison between the 30% and the 60% before any VE items were implemented. So that's an important stipulation there. That was before we went through any VE efforts. So that's the differences right there. I think it's noted on one of those tables that it says that this is before the VE efforts.
So that's meaning this is assuming all VE efforts were accepted?
Were not accepted yet.
Okay, so I guess that's where I'm getting confused. So if the cost was supposed to go down by 21,000, assuming we do absolutely zero value engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confused as to if we did some value engineering, which I think was like 200,000, how did the cost then go up by 700,000 after value engineering? That's
I'll have to look at what's presented, but I'm pretty sure it had to do with the sequencing of when the VE costs came in and what was available to us to load for this presentation on that table. So I can look at that more closely and get back with you on it, but I believe it has to do with when the VE efforts were implemented.
Okay, so I'm really confused. So is the 34,845,000 and is that number not correct then on that page? Because that's what came from the contractor, as I understand.
Do you happen to remember, John?
So the 30 and 60 on that is we give a 30% price and then we go into this value engineering phase. And in the first phase, we took that about $1.2 million of value engineering, and that's where we ended up. This phase, we only had about $300,000 because we had already implemented those 1.2 million on the 30%. We only had $300,000 of value engineering extra, which gives the difference of the 700,000. So both of those are before any value engineering efforts or contingencies were put on.
Okay, so then what you're basically saying then is that we took off 1.2 million from the 34,000 on the 30% phase, and then basically 700,000 got added. Well, actually, it sounds like we're back. Well, 700,000 got added back in from that number. Is that correct?
Correct.
More or less?
Yes. The price went up about $700,000, and we only had a little bit of VE on the second round because we've already implemented all the VE from the first round.
Got it.
The other thing to keep in mind is the contingency. I think we had 10% contingencies in the 30% estimate and 7% at the 60%.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So that was question one. Thank you. That helps to clarify that because I was like, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. The second question I have is I'm glad to hear that it sounds like prices are stabilizing. And obviously I know once we get to the guaranteed maximum design, what happens at that point if prices start changing again? Because obviously at that point we're at a guaranteed maximum number, but how do we still make sure the plant goes through if they start to see crazy supply stuff again?
So there's a couple things. Contingency will be part of that. We will, when we bid it out, we will try to get all suppliers and subcontractors to keep their prices for a certain amount of time. That's 60 days or whatever. And we will try to get as many contracts out to lock in those prices. And that does a lot of it. There is, if they're force majeure, if there's a large portion or a reason that those prices skyrocket, that would come out of contingency. But we try to build and try to, I guess, minimize that by getting contracts out as quick as we can and locking all these prices in as early as we can, and then procuring items early in the process so that we can lock those prices in.
Okay, so I guess just from our perspective as a town, I understand we have a contingency and that's great to know, but are we at risk of having to see this price go up from the guaranteed max, or is that's it? It doesn't go up from there?
It should not go up unless there's a change of scope or a force majeure reason that is out of control of the contractor, I guess.
Yeah, as the name would imply, guaranteed maximum price. That's the guaranteed maximum price. Unless there's something like a force majeure, then we might need to look at the prices again, but that's rare. So that wouldn't happen. So the contingency will cover a lot of those unforeseens. Typically at the 90% is 5% contingencies is kind of an industry standard. So we're hoping to see a lower number on the contingencies once we get to the GMP.
And that's where the price increases, if there is major price increases, would come out of.
The other thing to keep, other thing to keep in mind when we're at 90%, when John puts his numbers together, he'll be bidding out those on the subcontractors and all the equipment, 3 bids. So it'll introduce competitiveness in the market, and we're hoping that'll bring the cost down too.
You get to see those bids? Dave?
Yes.
Okay, and
Everything's
take,
all up
take,
in the book.
take any economies that might be coming, you get,
That's
take
correct.
advantage of
And
that.
the town has a final say on which one of the subcontractors or vendors or products or equipment is selected.
And I guess the only final question I had is I noticed in the value engineering chart that you provided that a lot of things were declined. And I don't know if this is the place to go through that, but would really appreciate that. Some of them have minor notes. But you know, if these are things that were brought up as possibilities for us to help reduce the cost, I would like to have a reason from staff as to why so many of these options were declined. So again, I don't do this today, but I would appreciate that getting out so we would know why we've chosen not to do those.
Other questions? Okay, we look forward to moving along quickly, huh? Get some contracts out, right?
Sounds good.
Before this thing goes up any further.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next presentation. We have one more. This is a draft 2022 budget presentation. Ms. Tippett, please.
I didn't bring a full team, just me.
I'll come be your team.
So inside your packet this evening is the draft budget. This evening, I'm just going to stay very high level. This is a statutory requirement that every finance officer in the state of Colorado before October 15th, we need to present our board with a draft budget. So can't do that. We met almost all day Saturday, and that was a work session. And so this evening, that is a statutory requirement that we're meeting. During the retreat, we did get some direction from our Board of Trustees, and that's obviously not in the packet because the packet was published and we were still working on that. So as I move through some of these items, I'll touch base on them. And then certainly as we continue to move through the next month, moving towards final budget, we will make notations of those. So first, I'd like to say thank you to the entire team. This is a collaborative effort between all of the leadership team, and we couldn't do it without their input. So having said that, if anybody out there has questions, most everyone in this room was there Saturday, but if you have questions, Board of Trustees contact information is on the website. My information is on the website. Reach out. This is a 140-page document and not always the easiest thing to understand. And then also we have an opportunity exactly a week from today. We will be right back here from 3 to 6, and we will have all of our leadership team and our Board of Trustees there to answer questions. So again, just wanting to make sure that you understand there's lots of opportunities. Pick up the phone, send us an email, or stop by and see us on Tuesday evening. Happy to help out. So as with any project, you have to start somewhere. So in order to do that, we made some basic assumptions when we put this document together. The first one is salary, wages, and benefits. And inside of that, we saw our council members hadn't had an increase in years and years and years. We took it back to them. Wasn't super popular. So we'll probably wait, postpone that. Let folks get the water sewer under them, and we will revisit that in 2024. So that in your draft budget, if you're inside of the packet this evening, it is still included in there, but we will be taking that out as from the direction that our trustees gave us. Sales tax is an increase, and we will go through that a little bit in detail. And then we made some assumptions on our water rates, our sewer rates. And then if you remember, we have, we can only bring on a limited number of building permits before the water and sewer plants are operational. And so we built our budget on 99 building permits. And that's important because our use tax is calculated off of that. Your impact fees and all of your enterprise funds are calculated off of that. And then we did receive $1.3 million in American Recovery money. I had been moving forward with the assumption that I was going to make a formal request to move that into the water fund. And then we were asked to, the board would like to see some other, just explore all of the options, or at least know and make a very educated decision in that. So again, inside of your water fund, that 1.3 is in there as a source of revenue. So again, I'm going to stay very high level. If anybody has questions, you can stop me. But your governmental funds, we have projected revenues of 12.5 million. And then we have expenditures programmed at 15.1 million. And that includes 3.9 in capital. And then there's also important to recognize I have just a touch over $1 million, and that is to pay off the loan for the park. And that was taken out in 2014. And so it looks like a lot, but it's a decrease of 2.6 in your fund balance. But we have some large capital and a debt. We would completely pay that loan off. And so the capital projects are listed on page 56. There's quite a few of them. And then the details, you can look at them if you go through there. Pages 58 through 139 would give you like the detail when we think we're going to do it. It gives a priority rating of why we think we should do it, when we think we should do it. So again, if you review any of those and you have questions or want to visit about that, just bring it to our attention. Happy to talk about that. And then as you move through there is if you see something with a GF, that means it was budgeted in the general fund. If you see something with a WF, that's water fund, and it kind of goes through there and they're kind of in the group and they will match your pages. So staffing was one of the items I wanted to touch this evening. So right now we're at 54.45 positions. We're asking for 6.5. That would bring us up to 61. And then a lot of municipalities have their law enforcement inside of the town. And so I brought those in mostly so I can use it as a comparison to other municipalities. That would give us 71.5 positions. You bring in all of your salaries, your wages, your compensation. That includes all of your FICA, things like workers' comp, and that's all totaled together. So that would bring us up to right at 6.9 million. And that is 39.79% of our expenditures. And this is something we visited about last year. And then the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they put out some great reports, but then they break it down even farther. And so this is state and local governments, and that's averaging right at 53.59%. So as you can see, we're well below that. And whenever you're in a service industry, this is our people. I mean, we don't show up on the depreciation schedule, but certainly if you have great staff, that's how we get these large projects like what Dave just presented done. And then I wanted to touch base on sales tax. It is our single largest revenue. So I could really goof on some of the other small ones and I could be off by 10% and it really wouldn't make a huge difference. But with this being our single largest one, I did get another sales tax payment today, but I like to go through those, make sure there's no anomalies, make sure that there's not anything that's, sometimes you'll have someone that was late and you get a big bump, but before you budget on top of that, you want to make sure that that report was accurate. So currently we get 2% and then that goes into to fund of the general fund. There's an additional 1% that's collected. That was originally set aside for streets 10 years ago. There was an ordinance that was brought back and the question was asked, can we share this with the parks? And so it's pretty common. You have hard surfaces, soft surfaces. In the past, some of that money went all directly to the parks fund. So inside of this draft budget right now, I have it programmed inside of the streets. We have some pretty large projects coming up and we wanted to see how far we would go before we would not be meeting our fund balance. So that 1% right now, again, is all in the street fund. That will be determined at the time of the election. We're asking the voters, can we continue to share this with the park fund? And it does not specify 50-50, 25%. It just says, can we share this with the park fund? Based on that, we may be making some adjustments. So for 2021, our sales tax, we had originally budgeted 1.8 million. And when I first came on board this time, same time last year, I was like, holy buckets, they're thinking I mean, that was an 18% increase. I thought certainly staff knows the community better than I do. Well, it proved to be correct. We're on track to come in right under 2.1 million, which would be close to a 25% increase. Again, I want to look at that sales tax report that came in today, and then we may have another one depending on the timing before we visit this again. For 2022, I am budgeting a 3% increase on year end. I would rather be conservative and then come mid-year and say to you, you know what, We're rocking it on sales tax, and we have this additional project that we would like to do. I never want to come to you and say, I budgeted 18% and I'm not making it. We're going to have to make some cuts. Those can be painful. And then I wanted to touch base just very, very briefly about our water and sewer funds. Dave just presented on the sewer fund. As you can see, it makes budgeting difficult. Their numbers change from 30 to 60. We're waiting for 90. At the same time, we're trying to make sure that we're on track to pull that loan application so that we can hit all of our deadlines. So right now, inside of the water fund, we are anticipating coming in at 9.9 million in revenues. And in addition to that, right now I have that American Recovery money in there. It may or may not land there. I don't know. So I will get you some permittable uses, the other options that we can explore. So for right now, I will back that out and we will wait for direction. We are also anticipating pulling a little over 10 million off of our loan that you guys did at the end of 2019 for the construction on that. That would give us a total inflow of 21.3 million. And we are expecting our expenditures to be at 19. And that includes our capital of 13. And most of that you can see is in both of these, the water and the sewer fund. This is the construction of these large plants. And then we also have 1.5 million in that debt service that we need to do. So inside of the sewer fund, from what Dave just presented to you, we have not pulled any debt on that. So we continue to move towards that number, making sure that we're in where we need to be to get that loan application done. So inside this fund, we're anticipating 16 million in revenues, 17 million in expenditures, about 14 million of that would be the capital projects, and your debt service is low just this 1 year because it's going to be a partial year. So eventually that debt service is going to be much larger in the sewer fund than it is in the water fund. So I just wanted to point that out because it would be like, yay, if I could keep 517 every year, I would be excited, but that's not going to be reality. So, and then we are planning on pulling about 12.1 off of that loan. It will be probably third quarter next year that we need to do that in order to meet our construction. So, and that's all I had this evening. Again, it's a 140-page document and almost everybody in this room was there Saturday. But if there's anyone that has questions, please reach out and we will try to get those answered for you. Any
okay,
questions?
so you'd rather see some email questions to you, is what you're saying.
Most of the time, it just allows us to be a little bit more detailed, and then I can share other information with you.
Yeah.
And you know, you can call us at town hall too, but sometimes with numbers, it's just easier if I can send like documentation and backup.
Okay. Well,
Okay, doke.
thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Look forward to the final document. Okay, everybody heard it. If you got questions, let's send them in and get our answers. Okay. All right, that does it for presentations. I'm on item C. I got a consent agenda of September 28, 2021. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the minutes of September 20th. The consent agenda consists of the minutes from October 12th, regular meeting. Can I get a motion to approve unless there's an issue with it?
So I did have a question. I noticed in the minutes that in the past, we've had some breakdown as to what comments were, especially when they were made by members of the board. I noticed with these minutes, there's really no detail to comments, and I wanted to know if there was a reason behind that.
So there, I had taken a class with parliamentary procedures, and part of that class was reducing the liability of the town when it comes to minutes. Summarizing comments from trustees and from the public could put the town at liability. So me and Ms. Garcia had a conversation about kind of reducing some of those comments to reduce that liability and to reduce the staff time that it takes to put into those.
Okay, just the concern that I have is in a lot of cases, there's really not any, I mean, obviously people can go back and watch the recordings. Thankfully we have those, but for people used to be able to have an idea of kind of what discussion happened, but now there's really not any way to understand what is, you know, what was the board saying? Were we in favor of something? Were we opposed to something? And that it's a little bit concerning if that's been removed from the minutes.
Well, I guess I would leave that up to the rest of the board, how you feel about the change in the minutes. We were really trying to make them more just usable, readable, understandable. And again, Krystal brought to me the concerns that she heard through the class on parliamentary procedures about when you start assigning names and specific comments to those names, how that creates a liability on the town. So the intent was not to not be transparent. The idea was to make them more usable for residents and for people who are reading it. You know, the actions taken, and really that's what's required, is the action that happens is what's required to be put in the minutes. We just tried to reduce all the language and all the comments out of it. So would love to hear from the rest of you, your thoughts.
Well, I think you just answered the question that I was going to ask, which was, why would we take minutes if we're recording the meeting? So if you record the meeting and you upload it for everybody to see, what's the purpose then of taking minutes? The purpose is to record the formal action taken by the board. That is the sole purpose of the minutes. So the other information that's included is just additional information. Thank you for the clarification.
My understanding too, through this training, is this is the best practice that's shared throughout clerks throughout the state.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it decreases liability of the town. So between that and available recordings, I'm in favor of it, especially if it saves your time.
I would, pardon me, I would concur with Trustee Kinney regarding, this item.
I always thought the minutes were a little bit lengthy to begin with, because I always considered minutes to be the record of the action only and not the back and forth in between. So I'm okay with it, especially I know it takes a lot of time to go back and review video and stuff like that, when basically when she takes roll call for our actions, that's pretty much all that really needs to be in writing.
Okay. Other comments, Trustee Gator?
There's no other comments. The direction of the board is pretty clear. Something that I think is better the way that it was, but obviously the direction of the board is where we'll go. So. Okay, I can understand your question about it. We don't want stuff getting buried, and but we also don't need to record a bunch of sidebar conversations either, right? I mean, that's why we have just the initial action, and you can upload the video. So I'm with what the staff is recommending to do to decrease liability and improve efficiency, improve that. So I'm good with it.
And I'd like to add that Planning Commission will be following suit as well.
Okay. Anything else on this agenda? Can I get a motion to approve, please?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator.
Yes.
Trustee Jerome.
Yes.
Trustee Kenny.
Yes.
Trustee McDonald. Yes. Trustee Whitehouse.
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, move on to action items. This first one coming up is a second amendment to the development agreement for Sage Meadows subdivision. Cody Bird's going to talk about it, our planner.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Cody Bird, Planning Director. As the Mayor introduced, the agenda item I'm presenting tonight is an agreement for the second amendment to the Sage Meadows subdivision development agreement. Excuse me. This action item is related to the Sage Meadows second subdivision. That's the kind of northwest quarter of a section of land that the first 3 quarters are mostly built out for Sage Meadows subdivision. The plat and zoning for Sage Meadows second subdivision was approved in November of last year, and it was approved subject to a development agreement. The developer and town staff have been coordinating on a number of items relative to the Sage Meadows second subdivision, and that's what you see in this second amendment presented to you tonight. We're calling it the second amendment because the original development agreement for Sage Meadows subdivision, the first 3 quarters of that section of land, had a development agreement with a lot of terms identified, outlined, and for development of the property. And that original agreement contemplated this fourth quarter of that section of land being included and incorporated into that existing agreement. And that's a portion of what this second amendment is intended to do. The first amendment was relative to the provisions in the original agreement, which we're calling the master agreement throughout these documents that were presented to you. The first amendment contemplated some timing, some cost sharing for sanitary sewer oversizing that the town required, and some improvements on Highway 1, and the funding mechanism of railroad crossing improvements at GW Bush. So that first amendment was relative to the first 3 quarters. The second amendment is relative to the fourth quarter of that parcel of land. So I wanted to just highlight real quickly, this was in your staff memo, and it's in the draft agreement that was included with your packet. But the couple of things that we really wanted to highlight that were really what this agreement was intended to do was, first of all, as I mentioned, it incorporates this Sage Meadows second subdivision into the existing agreement and covenants for Sage Meadows. That includes incorporating the Sage Meadows second subdivision into the HOA covenants, the private restrictions, and includes access to the non-potable irrigation system. So well water for Sage Meadows second will tie into the existing system that's in place for Sage Meadows subdivision. I highlighted in the staff memo, there are 2 outlots that are identified for commercial or civic development. Those 2 outlots will also have access to the well water, the non-potable system, but the commercial intent or civic intent of those would not subject those 2 outlots to the HOA covenants, which are intended for residential purposes. So just the distinction there, I wanted to make sure we highlight that. They will still have access to the non-pot water. The next item was oversizing of a sanitary sewer line. As I mentioned a moment ago, the Sage Meadows subdivision was required to upsize sewer to accommodate future growth north and west of the site. As part of Sage second subdivision, that line will be extended. And the development really only needs an 8-inch line to meet their purposes. The town is required an 18-inch line in accordance with our wastewater collection system master plan. And so whenever the town requires oversizing, it's common and typical in our policy to pay the incremental cost of the difference between what is required for the development and what we're asking for. So this agreement amendment contemplates that payback. That would be paid through collection of impact fees from lots within the subdivision. A portion will be put in a restricted account and refunded upon acceptance by the town. The next item that's unique to this property is a fee in lieu instead of land dedication for park purposes. As you might remember, when the board considered this, the park was contemplated. We asked the developer, we also asked the Planning Commission and the Parks Advisory Board if they felt it was appropriate to require a park dedicated in this subdivision when it's so close to Viewpoint Park, other open space, and has access to the Sage Meadows existing clubhouse and pool. And it was agreed by all 3 of those boards that it was preferable to ask for a fee instead of additional land. And so with working with the developer, we required that they obtain an appraisal to identify the appraised value of those platted lots. Based on that appraised value and the amount of land that would be required for parks normally, came up with a dollar amount, and that's what the developer will pay to the town for future park purchases. And then the next item that's unique to this property, we haven't done one of these in recent history here in Wellington, but a traffic signal was identified as a potential need at the intersection of Highway 1 and GW Bush. After some additional analysis with traffic engineers, the warrants for a traffic signal, meaning what is the threshold where or when that traffic signal is required, have not yet been met, but they were identified as being near to being met. So what we've required of the developer is that they provide a cash escrow for that proportionate share that this subdivision would impact that intersection improvement. And they'll provide that cash escrow to the town to be held for when that traffic signal warrant is met, meaning it's now required. We would have the funds that this property would have otherwise dedicated. The remainder would come from additional impact fees collected for other developments within town and or future development requests adjacent to the site. And the last piece that's unique to this amendment is the town has a requirement for undergrounding power lines associated with the development proposal, including existing overhead lines being relocated underground. As part of this agreement process, what we've asked the developer to do is provide a cash escrow for the proportionate share that would be impacted by this development. What the town would really like to do, what staff is proposing, is this is a pretty long stretch of existing overhead lines along Highway 1, and it's not very cost effective to go in and do a few hundred feet and then do it again, immobilize and do a few hundred feet again. So what we've asked is for the cash escrow to be held by the town so that when we have additional future development north of here that impacts that longer stretch of line, to contemplate doing that project all at once and starting to combine the fees collected for individual developments and do it all in one shot. We base this number off of the actual cost paid by Poudre School District when they undergrounded the power lines adjacent to their site. And we broke that down to a linear foot cost and applied that to the linear frontage of residential property in this Sage second subdivision. So that's how we came up with the number. That would, again, would be held until a larger project could be undertaken and do that all at once and result in best cost savings for the town. Mr. Darren Roberson, developer for Sage Meadows second subdivision, is here tonight. If he has anything else he wants to add, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure that Mr. Roberson would be able to answer questions as well.
Darren Roberson, Sage Homes, Sage Development. Got to thank Cody for all his help on putting this together and wrapping up this project. And obviously it's time consuming, but we work together to hopefully add value to the town and help with the parks and help with the undergrounding that I don't think anybody's done yet on undergrounding power lines. So we tried to partner with that too. So hopefully that's added value. So
well, it sounds like it. Are you satisfied with how your whole thing is rolling over there?
I wish we could do more permits, but we don't know when we'll actually develop it. I mean, obviously we're trying to work with Cody and everybody, and
we appreciate that.
Yeah,
you know, we're in a bind. We're in a bind there, but you know,
guys, just like on the sewer plant, I mean, costs are going up. I mean, we're sitting here and in 45 days, just from in 45 days of getting a 18-inch sewer pipe, it's already gone up because usually they'll only quote it for a week. So good luck on that one.
It's not good. It's not good.
But,
real quick, any questions for this?
Yeah, any questions?
These aren't for Darren specifically. I think these are more Cody questions. I know for the park portion and for the escrow, will those be going to restricted accounts to make sure that those funds are not utilized accidentally for something else? Because we don't know what time frame we're looking at before those projects are undertaken.
Yes, and so I'll work with the finance department to make sure that we put those into the appropriate accounts. Obviously, planning doesn't handle the exact financing, but you mentioned the park, and what was the second one you mentioned specifically?
For the undergrounding of the overhead lines. Just earlier in there, you had put in like something will be placed into a restricted fund up with the fee in lieu for the park. Sorry, the traffic signal. I apologize. The park one says it will be in a restricted account for future parkland, but then under traffic signalization, I apologize. And under the escrow for undergrounding the overhead lines, there's no comment about the restricted fund. So I just want to make sure they're not going to be just held in fund balance where money could disappear.
Yeah, good question. We'll work with the finance department, and my terminology might be a little bit off. I've heard different terms used. We'll make sure that that's coordinated correctly with the finance department. But yes, the intent would be that these were earmarked, restricted, whatever terminology is correct, so that they're held for this specific purpose. The traffic signal would be held for this specific traffic signal because it's a cost borne by the developer for that improvement. We wouldn't use it elsewhere. Okay. Same is true for underground and other things.
Okay, yes. So I just wanted to make sure because I noticed there was different language in the earlier versus latter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other questions? Really appreciate all you're doing and that work you're doing on that track south.
Don't say that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. This is a public comment portion down at this point. So if anybody from the public would like to come up and speak to this issue, now's the time. Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Any no further questions or that kind of thing? Can I get a motion to approve Second Amendment to the Development Agreement with Sage Meadows?
I move to approve the Second Amendment to the Sage Meadows Development Agreement and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement.
We get a second?
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald, Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on. Item 2, we have a resolution number 28-2021 authorizing temporary closure of the roads for the parade of lights.
Good evening. So this is a resolution to close Cleveland Avenue from 1st to 5th Street for the Parade of Lights that happens on December 4th. And I will stand for any questions.
Any questions? Same old.
Same old,
Program?
same old.
Okay. All right, if there's no questions. Can I get questions from the public on this road closure? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for approval. Can I get a motion to approve Resolution 28-2021, temporary closure of the roads for parade lights?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Thank you, Hallie.
Thank you.
Last item, resolution number 30-2021. This is a resolution making an appointment to the Wellington Parks Advisory Board. This is going to be a presentation by Krystal Eucker, our town clerk. Krystal.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. On July 27th, trustees Jerome and Gator, along with town staff and the chair of the Parks Advisory Board, conducted an interview for the current vacancy there. Since that time, we've had some questions and considerations from another applicant, and that applicant has since withdrawn their application. So pursuant to that interview, it's being recommended that Hallie Cooper fill that vacancy on the Parks Advisory Board with a term expiring January of 2022.
That's simple.
That's simple.
Any questions about this? Okay, public comment on this issue? Yes, please.
Melissa Whitehouse, 3922 Grant Avenue. Just a very quick question. Is it Parks Advisory Board or Parks Rec Board?
It's the ordinance is effective 30 days after it is approved. So currently, I believe it's still the Parks Advisory Board. It will be changed.
Thank you. Just to clarify.
Okay,
That's it.
it's a good one. Thanks. Let's bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 30-2021, appointing Hallie Cooper to the Parks Advisory Board?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, does it for action items. Moving to reports. Town attorney, anything?
I don't have a whole lot. Dan should be back next week. They've decided to name the little feller Miles. We
Miles.
found out today.
Good.
So,
Are you
Good to
gonna,
see everybody.
are we having one more meeting with you before he's back or no? Is
He's
this
back
it?
next, I hope he's back next week because I'm not supposed to be here. He better be true to his word.
Well, it's been good seeing you back.
And vice
Okay,
versa.
all right. Town administrator, got anything?
So I'll talk about that emergency declaration that's under staff communications, quarterly verbal review. So this was last brought before you on June 8th of 2021. On July 8th, 2021, Governor Polis rescinded the health emergency declaration for Colorado, stating that hospital capacity was no longer in jeopardy. Keeping the emergency declaration does not impose any restrictions on citizens or businesses at this time. Staff would prefer to keep the declaration in place until the ARA funding guidelines are finalized. And I would bring this back to you after the first of the year to look at again. If you would like to entertain having that declaration rescinded, we would bring back a resolution at the next regular meeting of the Board of Trustees.
Any thoughts?
So just a clarification to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you state that the governor has rescinded the state of emergency for the state of Colorado? Is that correct?
The health emergency, I don't know if there were separate declarations or not. I was tracking the health one. So I do know that that was rescinded as of July 8th. I don't know if he's entertaining bringing it back because reportedly the COVID cases are rising and hospital beds are getting short. So we just don't know what's going to happen at the state and federal level. And in order to be able to move quickly, it's just preferable for us to keep it going until we have our ARA funding in line, the grants that we're looking at, get those submitted and make sure that that's not a checkbox that we need to mark in order to apply for some of those grants.
So to this point, has there been any language or any discussion on the local state of emergency being a requirement for any of those grants or any of that funding?
To date, no.
I have no interest in removing our emergency declaration until we have final information on rescue dollars and how that might impact us. There's, in my mind, no reason to make a change that could put anything at risk. And that's my feeling on it.
White House, any comments?
I'll just, I agree with Trustee Kinney at this point.
Side?
I'll echo Trustee Whitehouse and Trustee Kinney's sentiments at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it is not imposing a single restrictions on the citizens of Wellington, I don't see the problem with it. We just need to make sure that we're, if it becomes a checkbox that we can check that off. I mean, I guess as the rest of the country starts to relax, which is rapidly happening, after the first year, I'm sure it would be just, take it off the books, but it's not really done anything one way or the other than, made us eligible for funds. So.
Okay, I think you got the board's direction. Keep it in place and find out.
Yep, I'll bring it back after the first of the year to talk about again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to go over sheriff's report tonight or no? Okay, I guess not. Does anyone have any questions for our sheriffs?
Not this time.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Bills or anything that are on my list? Anybody got any problems with the bills? Okay. All right. Board members, got anything you want to bring up?
So I know we were planning last meeting to go over kind of just thoughts from the CML. And do we want to do that now, or did we want to go through other stuff first?
Is that a long one?
I'll keep it fairly short.
No, but I mean,
it's more than like 30 seconds. So if you want to go through other stuff first. Okay. So just kind of wanted to give some feedback. So overall, it was really good to be at the conference and not only hearing some of the speakers and different things that are happening in different municipalities, but also having a chance to meet other elected officials from some neighboring municipalities, others completely, out on the west side of the state where there's a totally different environment out there. And so just a few comments that I have pages of notes, but kind of a couple of highlights that I wanted to share with the board from one of the speakers. And the opening speaker we had on Thursday did an amazing job and was just talking about kind of our role as elected officials. We kind of are under behind the scenes a lot of times, don't see stuff, but really talking about everyday heroes and what that really looks like. And just a couple of key things that stood out to me is just what he said about giving people what they want, whether we have it or not, and not in a sense of just people are entitled to anything, but we shouldn't just look at our current limitations and say, okay, well, we can't do that, but really going above and beyond and saying, how can we do things better? How can we really rise to the occasion? And then kind of shared with that is that people, whether that be our staff, whether that be our citizens, whether it be our elected officials, will live up or down to our expectations. So if we have low expectations of whether it be our staff, whether it be each other, our citizens, we really need to have those high levels of expectations. And then one of the big things that stood out to me, because we've been dealing with a lot of challenges from the past, was not using yesterday's problems as a reason to not get better. And dragging that behind with us, really cast a vision for the future and go towards that. So that was couple of notes from several I took there. I also attended, I think all of us attended the one on water rates. And there was a couple of key things that I wanted to highlight that. One of the key things they talked about was really starting with the vision of what does success look like and really communicating that. Because I think that's one of the things we get so bogged down in the detail. Sometimes we forget to build, what is that going to look like when we get through all of the mess of getting to the other side. They talked a lot about building trust as a huge part of the process, really showing legitimacy to the process that we're going through to arrive somewhere. And then the earlier we get buy-in in that process from our partners in the community, the better that things will go. One of the other things they brought up was audience mapping, which was really great. They had like a quadrant that you go through, and it kind of just identifies all of the different stakeholders within the community and where they fall in terms of the how much they care about an issue and how much influence they have in the community. And you kind of determine based on where people are in that quadrant, what type of outreach do you do? So you're not trying to, maximize, we're not pouring tons of effort and dollars into trying to communicate to people who don't care. But at the same time, we're not using all of those monies and funds to pay to people to go to people that care, but they don't even live in the town, right? So they have no impact on what we do. And so really kind of identifying, okay, who are the key people that we need to focus our energy on, which I think was really good. They talked about the Citizen Review Committee, which is very similar, or what is exactly what Ms. Garcia talked with us about on Saturday that we're looking to do with the wastewater. And really that's key because you can kind of show we're getting feedback from the citizens. We're trying to incorporate that into what we do to figure out, even if it's small things, we're showing that, hey, we've made changes based on the comments you've brought. And then just really looking at some ways to help with engaging with more people, because the more people we can communicate with, the more that we're going to get out of that. Another thing that came up was I attended a session about the ARA dollars. And there was a lot of discussion on that and different things, but kind of the key things that were the takeaways was wait to use the money, don't rush to spend it. They said really wait to get final numbers. And then they also said really try to focus in on accessing state funds first, because there was money given to local municipalities, but there was also money given to states. So they said, before you just rush and say, okay, we're spending all of our ARA money, wait to see what is the state going to do? Can we access some of that money? Can we utilize some of that? And then once you've expended all of those dollars, they then said, go and look to say, what can we combine those monies with? Are there other programs or things where we need to come with a large dollar number to the table? And can we potentially use those ARA grants? So they were just saying, don't rush into, which we kind of talked a little bit on Saturday. They just said, don't rush to spend those funds right away if you can. I said, obviously, if you have to, you have to. But so that was something that I wanted to share as well. The final thing, in the talks that I attended, there was a year of engagement. I believe Ms. Garcia also attended that discussion, was the city of Wheat Ridge. And they had been going through some major changes, building 3-story buildings, and we're near to having riots in the town. And so they really went back and said, okay, how do we do a better job? They kind of said, basically, we as a city didn't know the community and the community really didn't know the city. It was kind of, we were fighting each other instead of working alongside. And they really went through a lot of how they changed that to where they're now working alongside the community. And the start of it was they did a neighborhood study where they talked to people about their specific neighborhoods. And that was not something that staff or professionals ran. It was, they had someone facilitate it, but it was run by the citizens. And the feedback they got was the citizens. It wasn't our interpretation. It was literally like, we came to them and this is what they said. And then what they did is they then focused in, now they're 30,000, so they're a little larger than us, but they said, we're going to look at specific neighborhoods. And they just did one neighborhood at a time, and they did very focused deep dives into that neighborhood. And they didn't come in with presupposed plans of this is what the issues and problems are. They came in and said, what do you see? And then they gathered all that information. Then they came back to them and said, this is what we've heard you say. Here's what we can do about it. Tell us what's most important, and basically had citizens rank it. And then they used that to then build, okay, what things can we now go to move about that? And so I think that was just really provided a great way to look at things in terms of how can we better engage with the community, because I do see a lot of similarities there. We're going through a lot of challenges. They're hard on our community. But I thought there was a lot of really valuable input that came out of that as to ways that we can really work with our community to do a better job on that. And so obviously I have more notes on that, and I'm sure Ms. Garcia does as well. But and then the final thing that was a takeaway, this is from several conversations with other elected officials, was just being very cognizant of what our role as government is. And this was a common theme I'd heard from several other people, is that as they'd added things into what their core job was to do as a government, they started running into problems with budget where they're saying, you know, we've got too many things coming in. We've got lots of great programs, but we now don't have money to fund our required things that we have to do. And so I think that that's just something for us to be careful with, as we're heavy on infrastructure right now because we have to be, but we just need to make sure that we're very cautious about what things do we add into our budget, because we need to remember what is our role as government. So, and those are kind of the highlights.
Okay, thank you for going and attending all those good points, all of them. Ms. Garcia was there too, so
And
you've
Trustee Kinney.
and Trustee Kenny was there.
Yeah, I have a few
Okay, let's
items
hear
to
it.
comment on as well. First of all, my hope is that we can all, the entire board, attend next year. The value, networking, best practices from other communities was astounding. But not only that, I was completely burnt out before I went to this, and I feel re-energized. I have mission, purpose, and understanding about how that can be accomplished now from seeing best practices from these other communities. And I think it's something we could all benefit from to serve Wellington. So that's the first thing I want to say. Is my plea to everyone is make sure you make time for this and make sure we have the money budgeted for us to attend, because it, again, will pay back so much and we will do more good by knowing what others are doing. So that's the first thing that I wanted to do, just as a plea for that. The theme for this year for CML obviously was based on recovery, responding to and reacting to and coming together to do the best good in recovering from COVID. A lot of the sessions targeted that topic as to, you know, what to do with recovery dollars, what grants are available, what different organizations were offering aid at this point. I actually got the opportunity to be interviewed by a couple lobbyists following it who were employed by CML, because I voiced an opinion that apparently is a common knowledge, but wasn't really discussed a ton. And essentially is there's so many opportunities for additional aid right now through grants, through dollars from the government, whether it's federal, state, or otherwise. And it is incredibly difficult to take advantage of those programs because of either matching dollar requirements or high administrative requirements in order to manage those grants and the process for applying. That was common apparently among smaller towns that have limited staffing and budgets. So they took that feedback very seriously, and I thought that was important to understand and acknowledge. And I'm hoping that that's something that we can recover from also within our town, is to make sure that we can take advantage of all the available dollars for recovery and not have to miss out on them because we're not able to administer those grant applications or manage the grant requirements following or match the dollars required to receive the funds. That kind of match is a common theme I heard today from several business owners who were incredibly excited to hear that they had received through the town and through DOLA the grant monies that are currently awarded. And then that immediately spiraled into very depressing conversations of how are we going to come up with 20%. So even after being rewarded the money, it still might not happen. So it's really, really depressing to hear that. But that is exactly what we talked about at CML. And these amazing opportunities that some people might have to pass on, even though the intent is to help, because they just, of all times, extra money right now is not available for these projects if these businesses are struggling, even though the end result would be amazing. So it breaks my heart to think of that, because I think the intent is to help. But if the intent isn't achieved, then why are we putting our businesses through this? So that was one example from today specifically that I've experienced that matched this common theme. The other things that were going on is next year's top priority from CML, their theme will be affordable housing. This is the new epidemic of the future. This no longer is a phrase that is only applicable to low income. You cannot say affordable housing and low income. Those do not equal each other. And that's something that we have to understand and change that in our mental capacity. Affordable housing is now a major problem for all classes. Middle class families are having a hard time finding places that they can afford to live. Now that it's affecting a larger group of people, it is obviously a more broader issue. And of course, it's getting more attention if more people are affected. So affordable housing is not something to think of as an unfortunate part of low income. It is now a thing that every community it's a burden for every single community and should be acknowledged immediately. They said, if you are not actively solving affordable housing concerns in your community now, that you are behind and you will have a crisis, a large crisis in your community in the near future. I learned from some communities about how they've solved these problems. They had other very specific issues that they were trying to solve, and maybe have a program that's been in effect for 40 years now and have a self-sustaining affordable housing program that they actually make money on every year. It took 40 years for them to accomplish this. So we cannot wait another year. This needs to be a top priority for our board. We need to make some considerations, look at best practices from other communities, and see with a political will from our board and from the community as to how we can solve this major problem now and bigger problem in the future. This is the top priority for CML for 2022. Okay. That's the most important things I wanted to say. Here's the parts I want to say though, because it was my obligation to share that because it is so important. But other projects that I heard about that were incredibly inspiring were very creative utilization of development plans to remake areas in a community to serve a purposeful goal. There's some very incredible projects that have been done with specific plans that maybe would be a little bit separate or have different requirements than what the comprehensive plan would say for an entire area in order to create and spark development in certain areas. With those adoptions of those plans, they saw huge investment into those areas. And these were all private investments. So essentially they said, this is the area that we intend to do this with. It would be great for the community. And then once that plan was available, people wanted to invest in that area. And it was a huge economic development, honestly run by private parties with a timeline that would accommodate, those who wanted to invest in that area. So there's a lot of really cool examples, specifically in Westminster. For example, changing the old mall into downtown Westminster. I don't know if you know that that's what has happened, but they changed the old Westminster Mall, which was dying, into downtown Westminster. So if you'd like to look at that, I have a deck on it, and it's remarkable what they have done. And then other areas too related around transportation projects. Another big one that Trustee Gator and I both really clung to was the piece around the water rates. Even though it was a session discussing water rates, it was more about public engagement. It was essentially like, how do you break bad news to your community? And then hope, not that they're okay with it, but that they find it acceptable and understand why it's happening, because it's for the better good of the community. So the major takeaway from this are maybe will not be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's the truth. Legally required public comment in meetings is not effective. It is a single way discussion that does not allow rebuttal, fact checking, or any kind of responses. It is not an effective way to communicate one way or the other between the public or from the board. It does not accomplish anything. And usually it is driven with passion from both directions, but no resolution. There's no response. There's no resolution. It's not an effective way to communicate. It is legally required and is part of public record, which is also important. But there are so many other ways to get better responses, collaboration, and communication with your community. Some of the best practices that we learned there are already underway within Wellington. So we're very excited about that. I think we're going to provide more information about that later, where members in the community can be way more actively involved. And it's not just so you know what's going on, so you can shape what's going on. So you can get the information that we get from 6 hours of budget retreats. Not that it's going to take you 6 hours. I don't want to deter anybody from participating, but it'll get you the information that you need the details you need to really understand the entire situation, maybe from the perspective of how we get the opportunity to see those. That's not necessarily available to everybody else without some significant work from the community member. So we'd like to make sure that we can be more collaborative and encourage more of these engagement processes that don't just, again, seek to inform you, but seek to get your input and that you are decision maker. So I'm happy to hear that we're diving into those opportunities right now, because honestly, public comment is just, it's not effective or pleasant most of the time. So I'm hoping that we can do this better in the future and share information better. Okay. The other pieces that I had, and this is honestly directed directly to our board, there are two major issues I learned about. One of them is called compassion fatigue, and I was suffering from it, and I think I still am, but being aware of it is very helpful. Compassion fatigue is when there are so many things that you care about so deeply. There's so many of them at one time that you start to become immune to it. So you have a hard time giving the passion that you would normally give to it because there's so many things that are so horrible at one given time. So acknowledging that that's a thing, it's a real thing that people suffer from is really important to know. A lot of first responders have this, for example, that I was learning about, for they see so many really horrible things or things that they care about so deeply so often that they are then just incapable of responding the way that they want to. So give yourself a little grace. And I think that'll be fine. The other thing is imposter syndrome, and those are for people who are considering maybe running for boards in the future. You do not have to be a water expert, scientist, engineer, any of those things in order to impact change and have an opinion on how to represent your community. A lot of people, especially women, and I want to say this out loud, especially women, think that if they don't have all the details, that they cannot participate in a conversation, and that is wrong. So people who represent others, I think they do so with their best intention and capability. But people are allowed to have opinions without being a complete expert in every single field, especially if they're doing that authentically and representing others. So you do not have to be the expert to care. So if anybody is worried that they don't know enough, or that's fine. And there's many experts available to help you learn more. And then the other thing for the everyday heroes, that conversation was incredibly moving. I was sobbing like a baby in the front row of that presentation for almost 2 hours. But the thing I took away from it is never underestimate the importance of a single moment. I can look into my past of incredibly transitional times in my life. One of them is what made me end up sitting up here, and some interactions I've had with individuals. They may have seemed very insignificant to my general life or even to that person who participated in that conversation with me, but those are moments that I will remember for the rest of my life, have shaped my life. So as we interact with the community, we have to keep in mind that maybe mundane or conversations that we've heard or had before are not important, but for that person, it may be something that changes their lives. So we have a lot of opportunities to do that as leaders of our community. So I wanted to share that too. Those are my major takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing all that. And about that communication with our citizens, you know, we always want to enhance that. So if you guys have ideas, okay.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway is Trustee Kinney is correct. The comment was brought up in a couple of different items about, you know, public comment is not effective. And I think that while I agree with that, there's the second half of that is not just ignore public comment. You need to have other ways to gather information. And I think the key that I heard from all the people that are saying, you know, we have a lot, they've got forums where they can capture information because, you know, yes, we are the elected representatives, but it's, you know, it's not, well, I heard from 5,000 people, Trustee Jerome heard from 7,000 people. And now who's, you know, what we have some forum other than standing across here yelling like I'm excited about Tuesday. So I think the key to that is if we're going to say, hey, we really want to get away from just public comment, we've got to make sure we've got solid ways to capture that information that are more effective. So we can't just say, no public comment. We've got to say, okay, what are we going to do that's going to be a better way to engage? So I think that we're moving that direction, which is exciting. I just want to make sure that we get to the goal there.
Right. Thank you very much. Anything?
Not after these two presentations, no way.
Thank you, guys. This side. Oh, you're good? Okay. One last thing. There's the possible 9/11. It's a traveling wall monument with also the Desert Warriors and the War on Terror that's going around. That couple of organizations might be bringing to our town. We're taking some donations for it. I think it's a pretty cool idea. We do have some discretionary funding. I'm not asking for any decision, but we don't know if it's coming or not, but it might be something that we could, help donate to as well from our town board and put it in the pot to help make that thing happen. It could be very good for our town and for people to see this monument. I don't think it's set in stone, but I think the permits were given. So it's just something that might come up that you might see, but we're not going to do anything with that now. Okay.
Sounds good. I'd love to be able to help with that if we can.
Right. Okay. All right, guys. If there's nothing further, I got 7:49. Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.